now.
So, good evening, everyone. We've got the lovely Rachael Wardell with us this evening, Director of Children's Services in, is it Surrey, Rachael?
No, London Borough of Merton.
Merton, excellent. And we met Rachael in the brief summer school many years ago.
Years ago. Yeah.
And we always start off with how you came across the solution-focused approach and how it's affected your work life. So yeah, how did you first come across it, and what drew you to it in the first place?
So that was I was learning to be a coach at the time. So I was an assistant director in a local authority, not the one I'm in now, and the very enlightened chief executive of that authority liked the coaching approach with staff, and so a group of us were trained and qualified as coaches to kind of be coaches to the whole staff body. And I studied how to be a coach, learned how to be a coach, coached my colleagues for that local authority. And actually I moved to a different local authority part way through before my coaching qualification finished. And I asked, would they mind very much if I carried on learning, and I would offer to continue coaching colleagues from that local authority, even if I'd moved on. And they were full of grace, really, and said yes. So I completed my qualification. I carried on coaching my former colleagues. And when I got to the end of the qualification, I needed to talk to my course supervisor about what it means to be a coach, in your life, because you need ongoing supervision and you need ongoing continuous professional development. So he said to me, you've developed your own style, Rachael. I would describe it as very solution focused, and I think you should go and see the guys at Brief for your continuing professional development, and you will find that they chime really well with the way that you like to work as a coach. So that's what led me to my very first Brief training course, which would have been in about 2013, I think. And I showed up there for just the 2-day coaching course over in their place near the Barbican. And I just thought, I can't believe I found something that just fits so well with how I like to work and how I want to be as a coach. And then I came back for more training and for summer school, and I've just kept going. That's where it started with me.
So when you say coaching, who are you coaching?
So to begin with, I was coaching my colleagues in the local authority where I work. That was part of the deal. And then I was coaching a bit more widely. So I once I'd qualified, once I'd moved on from that local authority, I would coach anyone who'd have me, really. But I was particularly interested in coaching in the children's services sector. And coaching aspiring leaders, so people who wanted to be assistant directors or wanted to be directors of children's services. By that time, I was a director myself. And then more recently, because I'm involved in a couple of other charities, one of those charities was doing a graduate management program and asked me to coach some of their their graduate management trainees. So I've coached now everyone from all kind of walks of life, but I suppose most of my coaching is kind of in the social care sector one way or another.
So coaching people from children's social care, so social work and social work managers. How easy or difficult was it for them to get on board with the way that you were working? Because I know it's obviously it's a problem saturated environment, because you're dealing with a lot of family issues and problems, and so how did they take to it?
Well, it was really interesting because it's very separate from my day-to-day work as a director. And we might want to come back round and talk about how solution focus has influenced the rest of my life, because coaching is a very kind of minority part of what I do every day. So some weeks I don't coach at all. But it tended to be that people found the approach really interesting and enjoyable. They really enjoyed the conversations. People would just say, that's a really enjoyable conversation. And I would come out of it feeling refreshed, and they would come out of it feeling refreshed. And it isn't particularly a positive way of working, but it does seem to leave everyone feeling positive, both the coach and the coachee. And so sometimes people would struggle a little bit with particular questions. You know, why are you asking that? But more often than not, they just went with it. And I'm a real enthusiast, so I don't sound hesitant when I'm asking the questions, and people just kind of go with the flow. They're sort of like, oh, okay, this is it. You know, this is how it works, and so they go with it on the whole. Yeah.
Brilliant. So where else has it been an influence for you in the social work, social solution focused way of working? Sorry.
So I think it's actually touched every bit of my life. And that's something that I didn't expect to begin with. So I expected this to be about how I like to coach, and particularly I'm very resistant to the idea of goal setting. You know, coaches kind of goal setting for the people that they work with, and then a sort of an accountability relationship where the person comes back and tells you how they've done. You know, and that never felt particularly comfortable for me. And so it's been really interesting to feel the influence of that in the way that I work as a director, because of course directors have lots of accountability conversations with their staff and their teams and with partners, and in safeguarding in particular, safeguarding children, you can't avoid accountability conversations some of the time, but having conversations which started with some presuppositions actually about people's ability and capacity to make changes themselves without me kind of poking them, and without me telling them what to do, and without me instructing, and without me directing. That was a huge influence on the way that I work as a director. So I'm a director who doesn't direct very often or very much. So I kind of prefer to draw things out of people rather than kind of trying to push stuff in. So massively influential just on the way that I lead and that I work with my colleagues. And also actually it's influenced me as a mum. So I've got 4 children. Aisha and I were talking before we started this just about how much they've grown up since we were last together. And my oldest is now 20, and I've got an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old at home with me. And the way that I'm a parent to them has changed as well. And something really powerful in assuming that they have hope, assuming that things are possible for them, assuming that they're capable, all those things that are kind of built into the way that we work as solution focused coaches when we're coaching, or as solution focused therapists when we're giving some kind of therapeutic intervention. But all of those things that are kind of built into the questions that we ask, which are just about people being competent at life, you know, position that they're people are doing their best and they're competent at life, and you know they might be struggling in this moment, but they've got within themselves the resources that they need, and being that way with my children, I think, has been probably really empowering for them. And it certainly means that our life, my life as a mother of teenagers, is very chilled. You know, with there aren't big disputes in our house. There aren't big disagreements. There are some disagreements between the children, but
yeah. I often say with the families that we work with that it's easy for me to ask these questions of your children, but I haven't got that emotional attachment. And I have a lot more patience with other people's children. I don't know. I mean, it's just that it just seems to be that. So how did your children take to that approach, or did they feel that, oh, why are you questioning me all the time about this and that, or did it just flow naturally?
Well, I mean, they are very resistant to being kind of specifically coached. So if I fall too much into that kind of language, if I say, imagine you wake up tomorrow and a miracle has happened, mum, for goodness sake, you know, they will have none of that. And who can blame them, really? That no one wants to be a test case. But they do appreciate questions about their strengths, about their resources, about their capacity, about their capability. They certainly enjoy being asked questions about their hopes and their dreams. You know, I mean, who doesn't want to talk about themselves in that way? So solution focused coaching comes with an absolute no judgment at all, you know, and so and parents judge their children a lot, and I mean, my own parents are absolutely lovely, but they judged me a lot, and to a certain extent still do, and learning to not judge my children and just enjoy how brilliant they are is where that is really powerful. So one of the early summer schools exercises that we did was this idea of finding the brilliance in the coaches that we're working with, and feeding back brilliance, you know, and not feeding back, you know, things where we thought that coach could have done a little bit better, or, you know, have you thought about trying this, but just telling them how brilliant they are. And so bringing that back into a conversation as a parent to a child, to say, you know, I've noticed you being brilliant in this way, and in this way, and in this way, you know. It's a lovely way to be with them. So yeah, but no, they don't want to be coached.
No.
Not even in the solution focused style.
So it's making it like a normal conversation. Obviously, with the solution focused approach, being curious and knowing often very little about the people you're talking with, and obviously when it's your own children, you know everything about them. How did you?
Well, you like to think you do.
Yeah. So you still had to remain curious.
Yeah.
Even about
They're full of surprises, full of delightful surprises. Yeah. So, yeah, and I find them endlessly interesting. I find people endlessly interesting. I mean, not just my children, but especially my children. But I find people's motivations intriguing. I find I'm coming back round to this idea of people's hopes and dreams. I mean, what people hope for, what people dream about, what people get excited about. It's very contagious, isn't it? And I find it lovely to talk with people who know a lot about something that I know nothing about, and are then they're really interesting about their own stuff, you know. And I just think, oh, it sounds really interesting to be doing whatever that thing is. Why am I director of children's services when this life over here is so interesting? Sounds so fascinating. And if people are asked those curious questions with a genuine openness, then what comes tumbling out is lovely, you know. So
yeah. And when would your children have noticed that change in you? Because you sound like you're very upbeat and sort of solution focused anyway. But then obviously you did the training at Brief and things started to change in the way you coached. What would they have noticed different about you once you'd got the bug?
I think I've never since that time found myself in a disagreement with them about anything, actually, which sounds kind of impossible almost to it sounds impossible to believe of teenagers, even kind of really nice teenagers. But the starting point for our discussion since then has always been about me trying to find a way for them to get what they want. And they've always understood that about me. So some of the kind of typical things that teenagers get upset about is, you know, being asked impertinent questions about who they're spending time with, and when they're going to get home, and how they're going to get home safely, and what time will that be, and things like that. But very early on, they became clear that I wasn't trying to stop them having a good time. I was trying to make sure they had a good time safely. So they were very responsible about telling me who they were with and how they were getting back, and whether that was safe or not. And I was always really clear that if they did run into trouble, I would rescue them. And I didn't have to rescue them very much at all. But a really good example of you know, how that played out in a good way in our lives was when my oldest was out with some friends, and one of his friends was in a very bad way with threatening his own life and harming himself in that moment. And my son knew that he had to get back by, but he also wanted to stand by his friend, and he had absolutely no difficulty in messaging me and saying, you know, this is what's going on with my friend, and this is what I do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And of course, because I want to support him to be part of a friendship group that looks after each other, I was absolutely fine that he was going to stay with his friend till the ambulance came, go with him to hospital if necessary. And in the end, he crawled in at 4 a.m, which is you know, more than 4 hours after he was supposed to get back. But he'd done a good thing with his friend, and been in touch with me throughout. So I was always going to appreciate that. So yeah.
Wow. So so in your current role, how has it had an effect on your colleagues or team members?
That would be interesting to ask them, wouldn't it? I think the place where it's most noticeable probably is in supervision and the way that I run meetings. When I'm in the chair in meetings, and in supervision, what I think colleagues notice, they wouldn't necessarily say, "Oh, that's Rachael being solution focused," but they would probably say, "This is a bit different from my usual supervisions." And I think what they notice about supervision is that it's very focused on what they want, what they hope for. So I don't come into supervision with a list of, have you done this and have you done this and will you get this done by then? I open a lot of my supervision sessions by reminding them, this is your time. So what would be useful for you out of this time? So I think that they would notice that. And then with meetings, that whole, when you're coaching, when you're, you know, purely solution focused coaching with couples or with bigger groups of people, then that drawing out of everybody's voice, you know, listening to everyone and kind of, you know, in a sense trying to conjure a hope that everyone shares. That is, I hope, what people notice about how we work together when we're meeting. So very diligent about everyone's voice, and looking for what we have in common, I guess, in terms of our shared hopes, and that strongly is the shape of our meetings and our discussions. And again, I'm not sure that every colleague would say, I mean, some of my colleagues have had solution focused training themselves, so they get it, they would recognize it. But I think a lot of colleagues would just say, well, you know, our meetings seem to be more kind of moving towards common goals, and that's not because I've set a goal at the outset, because that isn't that's not usually what I'm like, but it's much more because by drawing everyone into the conversation, by again kind of pointing out each other's brilliance, they connect with each other in a way that means that shared goals emerge. So lovely.
So I mean, you might be able to give us some tips, Rachael, because our team is slowly growing. It's not massive. But how do you so in the way that you conduct your team meetings, how does it open up? What's your opening kind of conversation?
It's usually not about the work. It's usually about each other. I quite often formally characterize it as a check-in, and I make sure that everybody has spoken. So we go around the table, not necessarily strictly in a, you know, in the creeping circle of death, but more in a kind of, you know, I will make sure that everyone speaks around this table in due course, and I try and ask a question that connects us to each other and to the thing that we're focused on. So I'll quite often start by saying, what's a really, I mean, this is looking for brilliance again, what's a really great thing that you've seen happen for a child or a family since we last met? tell us a good thing about something that's happened for a child or a family since we last met, in your service, or with one of your workers, or with you directly. And we often start our meetings in that way. So the bit of the meeting that would normally be, well, I'm Rachael Wardell, and I'm Director of Children's Services, and I'm this person and this person and this person. People do obviously still introduce themselves and what their role is, but they then go on to tell a good news story about somebody being brilliant for a child or a family, or and these are the best stories of all, children and families being brilliant for themselves, but with a bit of help from us. So I love those stories when they come back and say, an amazing thing happened with one of my young people this week, or an amazing thing happened with a family that I'm working with this week. And that's that's a lovely way to start a meeting for two reasons, because it firstly, it connects us all with the business of doing right by children and families, which is what we're all there for. But also, meetings run differently when everyone has a chance to speak very early on. And I find that if you don't do that little piece of grounding work, getting everyone's voice heard, certain voices dominate. And some people may never speak at all. Whereas somehow, if everyone's spoken in the first round, people kind of believe that they've got permission to speak up. So they do.
Yeah. And I think if you're allowed to share your successes when it comes to things that need to change to move forward, then you I guess you're more open to that, because you've had that opportunity to say, this is what I'm really proud of, or this is what's really gone well for me.
Yeah.
And obviously there are lots of boroughs who have social care. So if you were to go into a borough and try to persuade them that maybe you should adopt some of these solution-focused practices, because they're not all open to it. I'm sure you may know. How can we persuade social workers that it may be actually a good way of working collaboratively with your family?
So I'm very bad at this, because I'm committed to not imposing something just because I like it and I think it's good. So there's nothing worse than a director that's gone away on some training and then comes back and decides we're going to do I've forced everybody, and now we're going to do everything we do. No one wants a director like that. So I don't do that. So I think solution focus is absolutely brilliant. It's amazingly powerful way to work without the kind of machinery showing. I don't know why it's so effective. I've been in enough sessions with the brief team to know that they don't really know why either, and they don't care. It works because it works. So so I think all of that, it's been tremendously influential in my personal and professional life, but I don't want to make everybody do it. And there are other things that have been really powerful in my professional and personal life as well. So restorative practices are a really important part of how I like to work and what I do. And some of the stuff that I was just describing about team meetings works just as well in restorative practice. It's circle work in restorative practice in the same kind of way as solution focused. Another discipline that I've also been trained in is something called dialogic practice, and that's particularly effective when you're kind of trying to make change in institutions and do it in a kind of way that empowers and engages everyone in the change making. So I'm a little bit conflicted sometimes in that I've got all of these really interesting and powerful practices that I've learned, I've worked with, and they all complement each other very well. And sometimes I would adopt different practices at different times in different situations. So to answer your question, which was how do you persuade the kind of those who are a bit skeptical really about solution focus, I think the answer is you live it, you imbue your practice with it, you hope that people will notice that what you're doing is a bit different and is more effective maybe than what was happening before, and then people start to ask serious questions themselves about well, what, you know, how come that worked so well, and how come that was different, and how come that felt different, part of. Yeah, and then hopefully things take off.
Yeah, and it's I think giving respect to your client is a massive way of working collaboratively, isn't it? It's listening to what they actually want from your meetings. Even though you have that safety, or obviously you always have that safety in the back of your mind. But if I can work collaboratively with you, and we kind of are looking at the same or share the same outcomes, then it's going to be a lot more productive, I suppose, because you're asking for what do you think would be the best way forward for your family, because you're the expert.
Yeah. And without me pushing solution focused practice in my own organization, some of the stories I get back from my social workers show me that they're doing exactly that. So I had a lovely conversation with one of my social workers recently. So I'm in the office quite often, even though we've got all of this COVID going on, because I've got workers in the field and teams in the field, and when they touch down in the office, I want them to know that, you know, that I'm around. And so I do a little walkabout in the office. I maintain my 2 meters distance, but I try and catch up with their stories and their work. And this social worker was describing a full day that she'd spent with a family in the run up to an initial child protection conference, and the time that she had taken to make sure that every voice was heard independently, and to really hear from everyone who was involved. And that amount of, and this, you know, this was in that family's home. Done in a safe distance way, but it was very respectful of the fact that the family had strengths. You know, we were very worried in that case about what was going on for the child of that family, and we had good reason to be going to conference, but she approached that situation as though the family had strengths that could be deployed to make that child safe at home. And got really lovely engagement and feedback from the family about just the way that she approached that. Now, I don't know, because I didn't ask the question, whether she'd ever had solution focused training or whether she understood what she was doing in a solution focused way. But I was really clear about the principles that underpinned the work that she'd done. And how much hope that she'd allowed to and enabled to blossom, really, in that conversation for that family. So, yeah.
And I guess during lockdown, it's been a bit of a challenging situation for your social workers and for the service in general. So, how are you preparing for when things go back to normal? Because I know in our service, most of our referrals come through schools when children go back and start disclosing what's been going on. So how are you guys? How can we prepare ourselves? What have you guys done as a team?
So one of the things to remember is that none of it stopped. So you know, we've carried on. I'm sure you have too. Working throughout, referrals still come through. They don't come through in quite the same way when the schools have only been open for the children of key workers and children who are vulnerable, but they do still come through. And particularly in the later stages of lockdown, we saw a return to kind of similar numbers, really, of referrals coming in, and actually higher levels of complexity and concern and kind of worrying behaviour. So the pressures that people fear are playing out in families, those are very real. So some of how we're preparing ourselves is by acknowledging that we think that there's more stuff out there that we don't yet know about and that we haven't seen, and being ready. One of the ways that we're preparing ourselves is I'm really encouraging people to take some leave, take a break, just restore themselves, because people have worked incredibly hard, and because they've had fears and worries about the work that they've been doing, and they've had to be quite brave. You haven't always known whether the families that you're visiting might have coronavirus, and some families haven't wanted you in their house or their space, even though you have to see children and you have to kind of see their living environment. And that's been unsettling. And we've had lots of information and data, which makes it really clear that people from Black and minority communities are at greater risk. And lots of my staff are Black or from other minorities. And so they are experiencing both a kind of greater complexity of the work, but also they understand themselves to be at risk. And so we probably haven't got this right all the time, but we're trying to think with staff about what the risks are to them and how we can manage those and mitigate them. But my guys have been tremendous. They've worked really hard. They've been very thoughtful. They've been really inventive, actually. So they've, when they've had young people to work with who they won't have been able to socially distance in that young person's home, but they do want to meet face to face. While they've met in public space, they might have gone to the park together, maintained their 2 meters distance, still had a good conversation. So they've just those solution focused conversations that focus on your best self, you at your best. So I've had solution focused, even if they don't know it. I've had social workers out there in the field being themselves at their best in this time, and just really problem solving and meeting young people kind of where they are, which is, again, it's lovely to see.
Have you been using the wonders of Zoom?
A little bit, yeah. So we've had a bit of everything. So we've had Skype, which is what we had right at the beginning, which is okay, but it's a bit clunky. We've had Microsoft Teams. Everyone's very bored with Microsoft Teams, and we've had Zoom from time to time. So we don't all have Zoom, but when you've got a really big meeting, it's a great way to get everybody together. And Zoom breakout rooms are the surprise hit of our meeting.
Yeah, we
send everyone to a breakout room.
Yeah,
come all back.
We've well, Aisha's more of a whiz on it than I am, but yeah, the breakout, especially if you're doing training events, just to split people up and have practices. And what we've found in the lockdown is it seems counterintuitive because you're locked in, but we've reached out to more people than we ever have before.
There's some interesting stuff in lockdown, isn't there? So, I mean, I think there's no substitute for meeting people face to face, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys in person again. But it's still powerful to have these tools that enable us to connect with each other. It's good.
So, what are your hopes for the next year, Rachel? What's the plans for you?
I've got, in really practical terms, as a director, we're always a little bit worried that we're about to be inspected. So my best hopes are that either the inspectorates will leave us alone, or more likely, because I like my hopes to be realistic, that the inspectorates will come and find us in a good position, doing good work with children and families, and something to be proud of. So I hope we'll be able to demonstrate that. I feel fairly sure that we won't be left alone. We know that we're due for an inspection of our youth justice team, and also for an inspection of our core social work practice with children and families, and also a return visit around the work that we do with children with special educational needs. So we've got the full shebang that we're waiting for. So one of my hopes is that we're able to demonstrate the strengths of our practice in that. Another hope, and I would imagine that most directors in local government are if they're looking for hopes at all at the moment, are hoping that the kind of financial impact of COVID on local government finances won't impact too badly on the services that we lead. So I know how much it's cost my local authority and other local authorities to respond to COVID, and not all of that by any means is covered by central government funds. So what I really want is for us to be able to carry on doing the good stuff that we're doing and to continue to get better, and not be asked to do anything that I would feel uncomfortable with to save money.
Yeah, and it's like you say, that there's a lot of money being pumped in, but it's I guess they've got to recoup it somewhere, unfortunately, along the line.
Yeah.
But well, you're a great leader, and I'm sure you'll come through it.
Thank you.
So, what are your? I normally ask everyone this, and sometimes I shy away from it, sometimes I don't. And I know that because I normally ask people what their favourite questions are. You know, they're if you had 5 top questions to ask in a solution focused way, what would that be? And I've had various responses that the question isn't really important; it's the answer. But then I think, well, if you don't ask the question, you ain't going to get an answer. It don't just come. One doesn't live without the other. And me and Aisha, we've been in sessions where something you just ask a question, you don't even know where it came from, but it seems to have a really positive effect. So are there any that stand out for you, Rachel, whether it's with your teams or when you're coaching?
So this is very kind of basic in some ways, but I do love asking people about their best hopes. I think it's people are genuinely surprised. Not once they get to know me, but I mean, if I'm first time sitting with someone, what are your best hopes from our talking is always a powerful and unexpected question. So I love that question, and I think the answers that I get from people to that are really great. I love starting a second. So when I'm coaching, I love starting a second or subsequent session with what's been better. You know, and again, people are surprised by that. You know, that you go straight into what's been better, and there's a lovely presupposition in there, which is that something will have been. You know, and it's so broad. It's not, has your child's sleeping got better, or has your horrible boss got better, or has your kind of anxiety got better? It could be anything. What's better? So it's lovely to ask that, and I enjoy questions that noodle away in the tiny space that people have between kind of nothing and a little bit of what's better. So sometimes I somebody will go, oh, not very much, and I go, oh, but what's in that not very much?
Sorry, I'm laughing here.
You can unpack a lot in there. So that's a good one. And of course, I like what else.
Oh God, where would we be without what else? Well, it broadens it out so much, doesn't it?
It's absolutely beautiful, and it's kind of it's almost an all-purpose question. So we shouldn't rely on it too heavily because it might make us lazy. But it really again it supposes that there's something else, and there always is. So I love what else as a question. Those are probably the main ones. I get sometimes and this is when I'm coaching more than in other kind of times in my life. When I'm actually coaching, I do sometimes deploy things like scales. I do sometimes still use the miracle question, although I'm more likely to just talk about when you get up tomorrow and not imply that a miracle's happened. I'm more likely to talk about things being a little further towards someone's best hopes, rather than imagining a miracle has happened and all their best hopes are kind of there. But sometimes there's just a feeling in the conversation that would be a great question to use, and when that comes to you in the conversation, I always think, well, we'll go with it, and see where it takes us. And I think you're
right. I think there's every time I meet a new family, I almost ask the best hopes question in a completely different way. And like you say, with some families, I would do a full-on miracle question, or if you woke up tomorrow and something amazing had happened, or whichever way I describe it. I think that the instinct of whoever the practitioner is because I guess you have to find your own way of delivering this stuff because it's a very personal way of doing it. But yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes and it's a shame because I think the day after question or whatever way they want to pronounce it is such a lovely thing to behold when it works.
Mm.
When you get that interaction, who else would notice and what would they see?
And people in a really good session, people light up from the inside, and you can watch. So I was watching, listening to a webinar, and one of the questions that was asked was about body language, and I can't now remember which of my solution focused heroes was answering the question, but was kind of basically saying, you know, we don't might have been Adam, we don't work with body language, not interested in body language, we don't look at body language, we're not trying to read or interpret body language. And some of the kind of some of the thinking was it's a bit disrespectful in a way to kind of assume that you know something, that you can read something about a person from their body language that they may not have intended to tell you, you know. So it's kind of an intrusion, but nevertheless, and not because I'm trying to analyze the body language or anything like that, but you sometimes watch people just kind of uncurl, you know, they come in weighed by their problem, and uncurl in the conversation, and it's like pouring water on a flower that's wilting or something like that. You know, I don't know what it means, but it looks like a lovely thing, you know. When that happens in a conversation, I enjoy that just for the sheer pleasure of watching someone uncurl.
And I think the body language is an interesting one because I know it's I think Harvey at Brief was definitely one. Body language shouldn't really, it's not something that you can read a lot into, but when I open the door to a new family and I see the expression on that young person's face, knowing full well that they have been dragged here, it wasn't their idea. It does influence the way I ask that opening question. So if coming here wasn't a complete waste of your time, I know from your face you definitely don't want to be here. I mean, you know, and it may be that something had happened before they walked in, and it wasn't particularly them being at our office. But generally, with the families that we work with, the child is normally the reluctant participant. So yeah, I think it's and you're right. When we ask the miracle question, you see the smiles, you see the you do see lift, you do see them lift, and that's a lovely thing to behold. And often when we speak to practitioners, they say they can't go back to the way they used to work. Is that kind of the same for you?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there are times in a session where I'll ask a question which isn't kind of from the solution focused handbook, you know, and it's more just kind of that's where the conversation has gotten us to, and it's almost a kind of an ordinary conversational question, but I'll never go into problem talk. And even though I don't kind of run my meetings and I don't talk to my children like their solution focused coaching sessions, I don't go into problem talk, and I couldn't be comfortable there anymore. So and that's done me a lot of good because I've got a kind of I've got an analytical mind that quite likes to, I think I've used the phrase already, noodle away at stuff, you know. So it would be quite easy if problem focus was my thing, to noodle away at the problem. So actually having a framework that doesn't involve noodling away at the problem is healthy.
Yeah.
Rachel, I'm just going to read what Gil wrote. Gil Green.
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's a lovely statement. Rachel, you are so on target about how people respond to SF conversation.
Bodily.
Sorry, I can't even read it. I'm
Let
trying
me
to
put my
read.
glasses on.
No,
Hang on, Rachel.
I'm trying to read it like from an angle. Sorry.
You are so on target about how people respond
Oh
bodily
yeah,
to
there
an
you go.
SF conversation.
Well,
Sorry,
I can feel myself doing it when I describe it. You know, I was I was hunching up about how people arrive, and I was kind of, you know, blooming when describing, because you can't help but sort of you can't help but mirror it, I think, as well. That's one of the pleasures of being a coach. I never end a coaching session feeling tired. Never. So I sometimes go into a coaching session. I sometimes think, you know, because I've got a busy day job. I sometimes coach at the end of the day, and I sometimes, you know, leave work tired, go and meet someone feeling tired. I always leave a coaching session less tired than I entered it, because there's just something buoyant about sharing that time and space with someone and giving yourself. So that's the other reason why I like it, and in a sense, why it's such a good companion piece to the other work I do, is because my days are really bitty and fragmented and focused on lots of different things, and the luxury of committing the whole of my attention to one person, or, you know, one couple or one family, one team, just really only focusing on what is said in the room in that time, and not worrying about whether it's consistent with last week or whether they'll say something different, but just now.
And have you found this, that I mean, it may not be this particular way of working, but for me, I know for sure it really heightened the fact that you have to really listen to what people are saying, because you don't know what next question to ask if you don't.
Yeah,
so it really heightened my my listening. My kids won't say I listen, but really heightened that sort of really intently listening, and not reading between the lines, but just listening to what words have been spoken. So wow, so you do a 4 days work and coaching in the evenings. So what do you do to relax?
all sorts of things. It's amazing what you can squeeze in. Yeah. So yeah.
Who's this? Oh, we got a question from you. Oh, hang on.
sorry, glasses on.
Rachel, do your frontline workers use an SF approach?
So not necessarily. Some of them do, because that's how they've been trained. But Merton's practice model is a systemic model, and we have signs of safety as our kind of framework around child protection, in particular, and the kind of you know, signs of well-being and that kind of way of thinking rolled out through our wider practice, and we've got a set of kind of skills and tools within that that practitioners are trained in, and motivational interviewing is one of those. So we don't have solution focused as a kind of from the top down, everyone must learn this and do this way. No, but as I was saying earlier, I encounter social workers who are clearly working in a solution focused way, whether they know it or not, and I'm always kind of toying with the idea about whether to actively encourage more solution focused approaches. And the reason that I back off from doing so is what I was alluding to earlier, which is that it's really irritating when directors come along and have a kind of, you know, an absolute passion for something, which isn't the way that you were trained, you know, when you were qualifying, and which requires you to turn your practice on its head. So I prefer to encourage a kind of solution focused behaviours and mindset by acting that way myself. And I know that some of my frontline practitioners do work in a solution focused way, but it's by no means universal.
So it's almost like because of the way you are, it's subconsciously seeping in because of the way that you, rather than it being a directive from the top.
Yeah. And I would behave a bit differently, I think, if I was if I was trying to fix something where I felt that people's values, their approach to families wasn't okay. So one of the things that I think about our practice is that it's really, really important to be respectful of families and their lives, even when you're worried about the safety of a child, to understand, or the children of the family, to understand that this is an extraordinary intrusion, and that people are very vulnerable, and that while we're doing all the work that we need to do to make sure that that child or those children are safe, we have to kind of recognize that this family unit has something that connects it, which will outlast us, and outlast our intervention. And so respecting that is really important. So if I was to be working somewhere where I didn't feel that my frontline workers had that approach, then one of the first things that I would do is more actively direct people to work in this way, think in this way, because I think as a discipline, it can't help but take you there. If you ask these questions, if you frame your work with families in this way, you can't help but respect their resources, their capacity, their hopes for a different kind of future.
Yeah, and I think when, like you say, when you work respectively and collaboratively, you're more likely to get families being more receptive to the person that's trying to support them, rather than thinking, I better be careful what I say here because this person's not for me, this person's against me. And then that's going to make a massive difference, I think, in what families tell their social workers.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be solution focused in your work without absolutely accepting your clients are doing the best that they can in that moment. So just approaching them from the point of view that, whatever we might think of how they're behaving, if we were judging it in this conversation, we're not judging it, we're just listening, we're just talking, and clients feel that differently. So they understand that we're on their side is not quite the right word, because we've still got these difficult things to do, but but we're not against them. You're right, Joe.
Yeah, it's a collaboration. It's a working in together. So Mark is saying, isn't the best way to being SF into the work by asking the SF questions? Basically, by merely asking the solution-focused questions, it kind of embeds it. Anyway.
But not all conversations all the time lend themselves to all of the solution-focused questions. So to give an example, if I start a supervision, let's say by saying, this is your time, what's most useful to you in this next hour, that we get done together. I think that's a solution focused approach, but it's not a classic solution focused question. But if someone I was supervising turned up and I said, what are your best hopes from our talking, they'd kind of feel like I was working on them as a coach. And that isn't in that moment when I'm engaged in supervision, that isn't the relationship that I have with them. So there is something about, yes, classically deploying the questions takes you to a solution focused place. But if you, I'm not articulating this very well. I'll give another example. So one of the things that I do quite a lot as a director is I spend quite a lot of time with people who have made a complaint, and it'll be a serious complaint if it arrives at the director, and it'll be about the practice of someone who works with me, and that's very disappointing when that happens, because obviously I would hope that our practice wouldn't elicit complaints, but I'm open enough to know that we don't get everything right, and that quite often when a complaint is made, the complainant has has real reason for being there and for wanting us to be sorry and to do better. If I opened a conversation with a complainant by saying, what are your best hopes from our talking? I think they would think that I wasn't treating their complaint seriously. That said, when I open a conversation with a complainant by saying, tell me about, tell me about what you're worried about, tell me about what you're concerned about, and I listen really intensively with all my solution-focused listening skills, and I reflect back to them their concerns in the language that they've used, and I then start looking for their best hopes some way into the conversation. So I've spent a lot longer in a problem than a classic solution-focused coach would do. But it's still bringing solution-focused skills and questions, but at a point in the conversation where the person doesn't feel that they're being mugged off, I think.
Yeah. And it's also respectful to listen to that person's problem talk, because that's what I want to tell you at this time. And like you say, at some point, it's not being flippant and saying, well, so what would you like instead? What would you hope that would have happened? How can we, move forward? But yeah, unless you listen to that, especially if it's a complaint thing, and it's always something when I'm in sessions, and the first time I've met a family with a very problematic adolescent, and I will let them tell me the complaint too, as long as at some point within that conversation we start looking at what would be different if this was useful.
So what's interesting about that, Joe, I think that when solution-focused listeners listen to problem talk, they don't engage with the problem. We don't engage with the problem, and so you're waiting, you're finding your moment in a way to move into the more kind of the more hopeful line of questioning. And to go back to the example that I gave about talking with complainants, the way that quite often people engage with complainants is that they try and refute bits or defend bits of the thing that's being complained about. They engage with the problem. We engage with the problem. So a complainant comes and says, your service did this, this, and this, and all of those things were wrong. And out of the 5 things that they've mentioned, you kind of cotton on to the one thing that you didn't think was quite as wrong as they think. And so you jump in and you say, well, actually, it wasn't like that, And of course, that really irritates them. So one of the solution-focused disciplines is not engaging with the problem, but it is letting it be aired. And actually that helps even in the kind of conversation that I've described, because people feel really heard. Really heard. And what good does it do to get into an argument that says you're right about 4 of the 5 things that we did wrong, but this other one we didn't do wrong? Until you've admitted that we didn't do that one wrong, I'm certainly not going to apologize for those 4 things over there. Anyone who's complained will know that organizations often respond by telling you the many ways that you were wrong before they acknowledge the ways that they were wrong. It just makes people angry. So
it is one of the old sayings, isn't it? Is that solution focus isn't problem averse. It's not, and it shouldn't be that way. Gil is saying you are brilliant, and he loves how you use the approach.
Well,
have you met Gil, Rachel?
Thank you.
Have you met Gil?
I don't know. Have I? Maybe.
Gil's lovely. He's our mentor in the US.
I would be embarrassed if I've met him and I haven't, and I'm not interested in it. I've met so many lovely people on my solution-focused journey. So, Gil, if I have met you and I can't remember, I'm really sorry, but let's meet again.
Brilliant. Have you got any final questions? I share.
I am here.
She's here.
Keeping your social distance. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. No, carry on. Close up.
Close up. So, Rachel, is there anything else you'd like to end with? So, if this was your last ever broadcast, what would you like to say to the world of social work or solution focus?
I'd say, what else?
Yeah. Love it. Rachel, it's been lovely to see you again. I know it's been a while. We have to meet up again soon.
We do.
You know,
We do.
for someone who's so busy to give up their time for us, we really, really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. I
Yeah.
love talking solution focused stuff. So I you know, I was definitely up for this. Thank you.
That definitely comes across. So thank you so much. Is there anything?
No, it just asked Rachel to stay behind.
Oh, can you hang on, Rachel? Tomorrow we have Mia from Denmark, who Rachel knows.
Listen to Mia. Yeah, I do know Mia. She's brilliant, and
Yes.
it's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to Solution Focused Summer School, because she's always got good questions. So yeah, listen.
This is really hard. I don't know.
Go on.
So Mia, she's just pulled my chair. This is turning into something else. 4 o'clock UK time. I now have to learn, Rachel, to always say UK time.
You do.
It's unbelievable. Since this lockdown, we've been meeting some incredible people, but it's 7 hours ahead of us, 8 hours behind us. I'm getting all confused. 4 p.m. UK time tomorrow with the lovely, gorgeous Mia. So we'll see you tomorrow. Rachel, can I just ask that you stay behind for a couple of minutes, and everyone else, tomorrow.
Bye.